right. Well, we are, as Aaron said, still going through the book of Ruth. I've never done that before. That was fun. There's a thing here that's supposed to make that easier. Going through the book of Ruth, and we are calling it Ruth and the Redeemer. It's not what it's called in the Bible. It's just called Ruth. But as we are leading up to Lent, the story of Ruth is a story of redemption. And as Aaron hinted at, Jesus is our Redeemer, right? So even though this is an Old Testament story, and Jesus is very much mentioned in the New Testament, this book is the same story from the first page to the last, and it is a story of redemption. But God is gracious to us and teaches us about this concept of redemption in multiple ways. And one of those ways is through the book of Ruth. So we are in chapter 3 today. So if you have your Bibles, we will eventually get there. But I want to, so we are now ready for redemption. Naomi is ready for redemption. We have a lot of R's today. Love a good alliteration. I got to go be with the youth last weekend, and we talked a little bit about fear and our fear responses, and we had a lot of F words. Good words. They were all positive. They were all very clean words. That was a great start. Thanks, Lainey. So we talked about our fear responses, right? And we can respond with, did you guys remember? Fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. But we added a fifth word, which was Father. So we as Christians have another option when we respond to fear. We can go to our Father, like King Jehoshaphat did. So that was the youth group. That was the whole teaching. There you go. You got it. So fun words, fun letters that start with this. Words that start with the same letter. We have a lot of words today that start with the letter R. And so redemption is one of them. There are a lot of synonyms up there that also start with the letter R that are very similar to what redemption means. But when we're talking about redemption, which is not something we use, a word we use a lot in our English language, maybe you redeem a coupon, maybe you redeem a token, right? But when we're talking about redemption in the story of the Bible, we are talking about a person or thing who belongs in this space under this person's authority and protection and cover, right? And that person or thing somehow ends up over here in a different space, under different authority and under different protection, right? So, and redemption is the act of bringing it back to where it should be. So you might not be able to see these earrings that I'm wearing. It's because they're very small, so you probably can't see them, and that's kind of part of the story. I bought these earrings with my son. He got into like precious jewels at one point, and so we are at a jewelry store, and he really wanted me to get these earrings. I'm not a big jewelry person, especially not like real jewelry, precious jewelry. But he was really excited about me buying these earrings. It has just a thin gold wire and 3 teeny tiny emeralds, which is my birthstone. And so, because he was very excited about that, I was like, okay, fine. I'll buy these earrings. It's more than I normally spend on jewelry, but I will buy these earrings. So, buy these earrings, we go home, I'm doing my daily thing. It's Saturday, which is lots of chores. And I look in the mirror as I'm washing my hands, and I realize, one of them's gone. Yes, Kitty's face is exactly how I felt. She's like, yes, I panicked. Like I had spent more money than I normally did. I knew this was really important to Peter. It wasn't that important to me, but it was important to him. I knew he'd be really upset because I lost these things within like an hour of buying them, right? So, and I also realized I had been all over the house because I had been cleaning, I had been vacuuming, I was doing laundry, I was doing yard work. So I knew that I needed help finding this earring. So I prayed. I panicked first, right? My fear response, right? I panicked, I froze, and then I went to the Father and I asked for help. And as you can see, since I'm wearing both of them, God helped me find it in the yard. This thin little wire with tiny little gemstones on it was in the dirt in the yard, and God helped me find it. So God helped me redeem my earring and restore it to its rightful owner. And he helped me do it, right? So that's an example. So it is reclaiming something that was lost, returning it to its original owner. It's also sometimes requires an exchange of value. Sometimes you can just get it back, but sometimes you have to give something in exchange, right? So like parents, right? You guys, if you've left your kids in Kid Zone this morning, you voluntarily handed them over to another person to possess your children for the next hour or so. And then you will go and claim them back, right? You will reclaim them. You will redeem them back into your possession. Most of you, all of you, please do that. We need you to do that, right? But let's say, and you didn't have to pay for that, right? At this point, we don't charge you for that. Who knows if that'll change in the future? I have no authority over that, but we don't charge you for that. But let's say you get a lot of parking tickets and you don't pay them, and the city impounds your car. And you have to, some of you are nodding your heads. So you say, I'm not going to say who. And the city impounds your car, and so you have to go down to City Hall. First, you have to pay off all your parking tickets, right? But then you probably have to pay a fee on top of that to reclaim this thing that actually belongs to you. Sometimes there is an extra cost involved in reclaiming this thing that was yours, right? But a lot of times, and in our story with Ruth and Naomi, well, there is a little cost involved. But then there's also examples in the Bible, and this happened in the Old Testament, the New Testament, where people would become so poor and so destitute that they would have to sell themselves as a servant, right? And they would have to work off this debt that they paid. And so the act of purchasing them back, purchasing them out of slavery, out of servitude, was also an example of redemption. So reclaiming something that was lost, something that was voluntarily given away, or something that was taken from you in reclaiming. So one of the first examples where we see this in the Bible is the story of the Exodus, right? Where we have the nation of Israel, God's chosen and cherished people, who come under the claim of Pharaoh as slaves. Pharaoh's like, nope, there's too many of you. You all are getting out of hand. We're going to make you slaves. And so they're here under God's love and authority and protection, and now they're under Pharaoh as slaves. And so God uses Moses, right? He uses another person, and he says to Moses, say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Remember that language. That's why it's in yellow. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians, and I will bring you to the land, very important, the land that I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, right, the descendants of which are the nation of Israel, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. So we see this land is really important, right? God takes them out from under the yoke of slavery under Egypt. They wander through the desert for about 40 years, right? And then God brings them into the promised land. And each of these tribes, right, he gives the tribes certain parts of this promised land. He allots it to them. It's a gift to them, this land, right? But he wants to make sure that they remain in this land. This land is a really important gift from God, and it is important to the Israelites. So he sets up this system, right, to ensure that they can stay in the land. Now, I talked before about the fact that people would sell themselves into slavery or servitude, right, and they could be redeemed. So if they couldn't buy themselves back out of this servitude, a family member would, and that family member would be called a kinsman redeemer. A kinsman, right, your kin, your family, or a guardian redeemer, there's different translations, but a kinsman redeemer would be able to purchase you back to your family, to your tribe, right? And the same applied to the land. Now, this land that God gave to the Israelites as a gift, it was just for them to possess. They didn't actually own it, so they couldn't sell it. It was theirs to use. It was a blessing to them. It was theirs to reap the harvest, right, and to live off of. But they couldn't sell it because it was really God's, but he was allowing them to use it. The only time they could sell it is if they got really, really desperate and they had no other way to feed their family. They had to sell the land, right, in order to have enough money to stay alive, essentially. And when that happened, God created systems for them to get that land back. So As soon as they had enough money to buy the land back, they had the right to buy it back. If a family member could buy it on their behalf, that family member could buy it for them, right? That would be the Kinsman Redeemer again. And if neither one of those worked, every 50 years was the year of Jubilee. And if you happened to have been displaced from your land, you got it back. You didn't even have to pay anything. So if you were really poor and you had to sell your land and you couldn't buy it back, 50 years later, if you were still alive, or your descendants could move back to that land because it was really important to God that you stay connected to him through this land. The land was a really important connection. And similarly, with marriage, if a man died and his wife had not yet provided an heir, that man's brother had the right to marry her, keep her in the family, keep her connected to the tribe, keep her connected to the land. It protects the widow, keeps the property, and ensures that that man's name survives, right? So all of these were systems that God created because redemption is a really important concept to God from the beginning to the end. And we see it over and over again. And we see it through this concept of a kinsman redeemer. God wanted to make sure that there was a way, if you were removed from your tribe or from the land or from God in any way, he wanted to make sure that there was a way for you to get back. And so the kinsman redeemer is one of those things. And we will see this in our story in the book of Ruth, which is why I'm explaining it to you now. And we will also see throughout the story that God delights these systems. He creates these systems of redemption because he delights in redeeming us, right? He redeemed the Israelites in the Exodus, and then we see Jesus talk about the parables of the lost sheep, where a shepherd notices one of his sheep has wandered off, and what does he do? He leaves the 99 and he goes and he looks for the one. And when he finds it, he says, "Rejoice with me, I found my lamb." And the woman who loses a coin, just one coin, just one little earring, she turns her house upside down, she finds the coin, and she goes to her friends and she says, "Rejoice with me, I found my coin." And then the next parable that Jesus shares is the prodigal son, who didn't just get lost or wander off, who intentionally walked away from his father, took his inheritance, went to some other town, did some wild living, and squandered all of his money, finds himself now in a position where he doesn't have any food, he's eating pig slop, and he remembers, my father has a bunch of hired hands. I'm sure they're eating better than I am. He knows he can't go back to his father and ask to be a son again because he walked away from that. He chose to walk away, take his inheritance, and walk away from the family. But he thinks, maybe I can convince him to just hire me back as a hired hand. So he goes back to the father, and what does the father do? "Rejoice with me. Let's have a celebration. Kill the fatted calf, because my son, who once was lost, is alive, who once was dead is alive, who once was lost is found." There are more examples. This is just a handful. But God, over and over again, shows us how much he delights in redeeming us, in bringing us back to where we need to be, where we ought to be, where we are safe, where we are loved, where we are cared for. So, to the book of Ruth. So Ruth takes place during the time of Judges, which was not a great place. So this is before we had any kings at all in Israel. Was not a great time in history, but I love the characters and what their names mean. Naomi, which means sweet delight, and she is a sweet delight. Elimelech, I'm not sure how you say it. I'm going to say Elimelech, and we're just going to assume that's correct. His name means "my God is king," so clearly he's a godly man. But look at the names of these sons. Mahlon and Kilian. One means weakly, and one means like, kind of a failure, which is kind of points to their fate in the story. So, spoiler alert, we already know this. So, they are living in Bethlehem in the tribe of Judah, and there's a famine. And so they have to do this thing that I was talking about. They have to sell their land that God had given them, and they move to Moab, of all places, which is like a rival, right, an enemy of theirs. And so Mahlon marries Ruth, another R word. Her name means refreshment. Love that. And then Orpah, her name, they're not sure what it means. It's something like neck or fawn. It doesn't really matter. She's not really in the story very long. So it doesn't really matter what her name means, right? So because here's what happens. The men all die, leaving the women, all three women, as widows. which at this time and in this place was not a good thing. And these women had very little chance of survival without a man, if any at all. So, and Naomi knows this, and so she says, you know what? I got to go back to my people. I need to go back. She knows she has a way back. She has a way back to her land, to her family, to her people. She says, I'm going back to Bethlehem. You girls, you go back to your families. You're still young enough. You can marry. You can have kids. You can have a life. Go back to your families. Do your thing. And I'm going back to Bethlehem. And so Orpah, whatever it says, whatever her name means, she goes back to her family. But Ruth is very devoted and committed to Naomi. And she's like, no, I'm not going back. I'm staying with you. And then she says, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Right? So just a minute ago, I read something very similar in Exodus, where God said, you will be my people, and I will be your God. These words are not an accident, right? The writer is intentionally showing us the faith of Ruth and how much she is kind of chosen to follow Yahweh. She was a Moabite, right? She didn't grow up with this. She didn't know this. She chose to enter into this, chose to follow God. And these words really indicate her level of faith. And there are other examples of this where her faith is even compared to that of Abraham. So Ruth is a remarkable person. Oh, look at that, another R. Ruth, the remarkable refresher. So she goes back to Bethlehem with Naomi. The other thing that is really fascinating about this is that Ruth, as an outsider, as a Moabite, comes under Yahweh's care, right? It's one of the first early hints that we have that God isn't here just to redeem the Israelites, but the whole world, right? Because Ruth is welcomed into the family. So Ruth and Naomi go back to Bethlehem. Naomi sees all of her old friends and family, and they're like, oh, Naomi. She's like, don't call me that. I'm not sweet delight. Call me bitter, because God has abandoned me, because her life is empty. She is filled with grief and loss. And so Ruth does what all poor people do, and she gleans in the field. She goes behind the harvesters, and she picks up the bits that they have dropped. And that is how they survive. She ends up in a field of a man named Boaz, who is very kind. He admires Ruth, because he knows I'm going to mix those up multiple times, so just stay with me. I go back and forth. So Boaz recognizes what Ruth had done for Naomi. He admires her for sticking with her and for choosing to follow Yahweh. And so I think he's kind of smitten with her. So he protects Ruth as she's gleaning, and he provides for her. He makes sure that she gets extra food. And then we find out that Boaz just happens to be a relative of Elimelech. And so as we read that, as the original readers would have read that, they would have known for sure this was not a coincidence. God clearly connected Ruth and Boaz. And Naomi sees this. And when she does, it changes everything. She's gone from bitter and forlorn to, oh, God is actually in this. God is still in my life. God is still acting. She still has enough faith to recognize that God had brought Ruth and Boaz together, because this was no small coincidence, right? So Ruth gleans, it says, until the harvest is finished, which is about 3 months, which is a long time. So that is where we are. That is the end of chapter 2. Let's move on to our text today, which is chapter 3. Okay. So one day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, my daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. So even though they had enough to eat, they did not have a long-term solution, right? Gleaning was not a long-term solution. Now Boaz, with whose women you've worked, is a relative of ours. Now Naomi knows about this Kinsman Redeemer thing. Ruth may not, but Naomi knows. Boaz is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor, so it's the end of the harvest. Wash, put on perfume, get dressed in your best clothes, then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know that you're there until he's finished eating and drinking, right? They celebrate. It's the harvest. There's celebration going on. And when he lies down, note the place where he's lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. Now this sounds a little scandalous, doesn't it? Martha's like, yeah. And the readers would have felt that too, because there was a similar story in Genesis where Tamar, whose husband died, did kind of do something sneaky and underhanded to get her husband's brother to marry her. And it was a little less G-rated than our story today. But our story is very G-rated, right? So just to let you know. Because Naomi knows Boaz. Boaz is a man of character. He is a godly man. And he is not going to take advantage of the situation, right? So, and she trusts God. Naomi is trusting God, that God has put these two together, right? So she is taking a bold step, but with some wisdom, right? So Ruth, so what happens during the harvest is the men sleep in the barn with the harvest, make sure nobody comes in and steals it. So here's Ruth, Naomi saying, go into this room, this barn full of men, sneak in there, wait till they've had enough to drink, and then go uncover Boaz's feet and lay at his feet. And Ruth, oddly enough, says, okay. I'm not so sure I would say okay to that. But Ruth clearly has faith in God, and she trusts her mother-in-law. So she went down to the threshing floor. She did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. So Boaz finished eating and drinking, and he was in good spirits. He went over to lie down at the end of the grain pile, and Ruth approached quietly. She uncovered his feet, and she lay down. And in the middle of the night, something startled the man. Maybe his feet were cold. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I love this. Ruth, very humbly, I am your servant. She's not being pushy here, right? But she says, spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer, or a kinsman redeemer, different words, same thing, of our family. So, this is a really powerful statement here. And to you and me, it means next to nothing. Just cover me up, I'm cold. But really, what she is asking is for him to marry her. And this is still, so she's pointing out, she's like, you're the guardian redeemer. You have the right to redeem this family, which means redeeming the land that Elimelech had sold and redeeming her as a widow of a kinsman. So he can buy back the land for the family, and he can marry her and bring her back into the family. So she's pointing out what he probably already knew. You have the right as a guardian redeemer. Now, a guardian redeemer was not obligated to do these things, but it was his right. It was his opportunity, and it was meant to be done. It was kind of frowned upon if you didn't, but you could say no. But it was meant to be done out of compassion, not out of compulsion or obligation. But this spread the corner of your garment over me is actually a custom that is still happening today in the Middle East. It is part of sometimes marriage ceremonies where the man will spread the corner of his prayer shawl or garment around the woman. It's similar to, and the word is also similar to a bird's wings, how a bird, right, protects its chicks. So spreading its wings over. So it's a sign of protection, right? It is a sign of care. So Ruth, she's very humble. I am your servant. But then she's like, marry me. So what do you think Boaz does? The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You've not run after the younger men. Clearly he's a little older than her, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. So I think Boaz is ready to say yes, right? I think this was a positive response. So I think he's a little taken with Ruth. And who wouldn't be? She's refreshing. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty and redeem you as your guardian redeemer, good, let him. But if he's not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. So he's a godly man. He's going to follow the rules. He wants to do this, clearly, but I have to make sure that the other person who's next in line has the right to do this if he chooses to do so. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, no one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor. He's protecting her honor here, right? It wouldn't look good for a woman to be leaving a barn full of men early in the morning. So he's protecting her reputation and also still making it possible for this other kinsman redeemer to marry her, right? He also said, bring me the shawl that you're wearing and hold it out. And when she did, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. And then he went back to town. So he's protecting her and providing for her, which he has done many times throughout the story. So Ruth goes home, and Naomi's like, how did it go? How did it go? Can you imagine? She was probably pacing the floor all night long, wondering how it went. Then she told her everything that Boaz had done for her and added, and he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. So Boaz is not only caring for Ruth, but also Naomi. He's also mindful of providing for Naomi. And then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens. For the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. So she has faith that through Boaz, God is acting and God will bring about relief for them, possibly redemption, hoping that Boaz will be the one who does redeem their land, restore them to their status in society, and marry Ruth. I would love to keep going, but this is the end of my passage. So I don't get to tell you what happens next. You'll have to come back next week for that. It's good, though. You should totally come back. So we see very clearly that God is working to redeem Naomi and Ruth in this story, and he's using Boaz to do it. But Naomi has a role to play in this whole process. She's not just sitting back letting God do all the work. God's doing a lot of work, but Naomi has a role to play. And the first thing that she plays in this role is going back to the land. She's returning. She's returning to this land that was given to her family, to the tribe, a land that was a gift from God, a blessing, a really, really important step. She's returning, essentially returning to God. She had gone into this foreign land where God was not worshipped, right? They worshipped other gods. She's now coming back to the land where God is king. So important first step. Then she recognized, this is when the story changed, and she recognized God's kindness, God's goodness. And it was through that recognition of God still working when she realized that God was putting Ruth and Boaz together. This is what allowed her to step out in faith and say, you know what? I think something's going on here. Ruth, you should go ask Boaz to marry you. So she recognizes his kindness, which allows her then to respond with wisdom and with faith. Like sending Ruth to Boaz in kind of a private space was actually a better way. It didn't put him on the spot publicly to give an answer in front of other people, right? So there was wisdom, there was timing. They waited 3 months. I don't know if I could have waited that long. But responding with faith and wisdom. So what does this mean for us, right? We're not living in some foreign land. There's no famine that we have to worry about at this point, right? But we do find ourselves pulled away from God on a pretty regular basis, right? Isaiah says, all we like sheep have gone astray after our own paths. And Paul says, we all sin and fall short of the glory of God. Every single one of us, every single day. We sin, sometimes in big ways, sometimes in small ways. But anything we do, so if we're standing here facing God, anything that shifts our gaze away from God is pulling us away. Jesus said, you're either for me or against me. There's no neutral. You're either looking to God or you're looking away. And we have so many opportunities to do this. Sometimes we're led astray by others, by the enemy. Sometimes we're just trying to find our own way. We don't consult God on big decisions like, oh, there's a famine. Should I stay here or should I go to another land? I assume they prayed about it. We don't know. Sometimes we're just like, you know, God, I know you would rather I do this thing or watch this thing, but I am choosing to do this anyway. Sometimes we are just outright walking away. maybe running. So, then it happens on a daily basis. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're human, right? This is the whole reason Jesus had to die. It's the whole point. Jesus died for us because of that. But God always provides a way back to him. Like the Kinsman Redeemer, the system. He provided an actual system to ensure that the Israelites could return to their land, this gift. He's always working for our good. Romans says he works for the good of those who love him. He was working for Naomi's good. She couldn't see it at first, but he was working. Who knows how long in advance he was working? Was he keeping Boaz single? He was an older guy and he was single. Was he keeping Boaz for Ruth? Maybe. I don't know. That would make a great story. And he always rejoices, like the shepherd who found his sheep, the woman who found her coin, the woman who found her earring, the father who found his son. There is always rejoicing when we turn back. So he makes a way, and he rejoices every single time we turn back. So as we are preparing in Lent for the ultimate redemption story, I want you to remember that God delights in redeeming you. Big things, small things, doesn't matter. They all bring him delight and joy every time we turn from this to this. Every single time. His response is delight. So if we follow Naomi's steps, step 1 is return. If you're facing this way or you're walking this way, just turn back and go this way. It doesn't mean you have to change everything all at once. Sometimes it's just as simple as changing and shifting your gaze back this direction and allowing God to draw you back. And recognizing God is good all the time. God is acting on your behalf. He is working good for those who love him. Whether you see it or not, look for it. Naomi had enough faith to notice it when it happened. She didn't know it was happening, but then when it did, she's like, oh, I'm actually not so bitter after all. God hasn't forgotten me. He's still working in my life. God is working in your life, and if you can't see it, just look for it. Ask God to show you. He is working in your life. And then respond. Naomi and Ruth both responded with courage and faith, right? And then rejoice. Don't you love all these R words? Rejoice with God when you are back over here, where you are safe, where you are loved, where you are cared for, where you are protected. This is where you belong. And that is redemption. We're over here. We're in God's presence. We're in God's family. Sometimes we step over here, or we're drawn over here, or we run over here. But God always provides a way, a mechanism for us to come back. So, since we are approaching St. Patrick's Day, worship team can come on back up. I thought I would share this lovely prayer for you of St. Patrick, prayer for the faithful. You can either read along with me or you can close your eyes as I pray this over you. And I think this is very appropriate to us as we consider turning back and staying with God. May the strength of God guide us. May the power of God preserve us. The wisdom of God instruct us. The hand of God protect us. The way of God direct us. Shield of God defend us. May the angels of God guard us against the snares of the evil one. May Christ be with us. May Christ be before us. May Christ be in us. Christ be over all. May thy grace, Lord, always be ours this day, O Lord, and forevermore. Amen.